Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Sleepy Professor channel. I'm glad to see you again. Tonight we're going to embark on a gentle journey through the golden world of honey. There's something deeply calming about honey, isn't there? The way it moves, slow and thick, catching the light. The way it tastes sweet and ancient. The way it just exists, patient and perfect, asking nothing of us but offering everything. For the next little while, just relax, settle into your pillows, let your breathing slow, and let me tell you some wonderful things about this remarkable substance that humans have treasured for thousands upon thousands of years. Let's start with something that sounds almost magical. Something that seems impossible in our world of expiration dates and spoilage. Honey never spoils. I mean truly never. Not in a year, not in a decade, not in a century. Never. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs. Honey that's over 3,000 years old, and you know what? It was still perfectly edible. Can you imagine that for a moment? Can you picture archaeologists in the hot Egyptian sun, carefully opening clay vessels that haven't been touched since before the pyramids were even that old, and finding inside them honey still golden, still sweet, still perfectly preserved? While you're lying there, think about a substance so perfectly preserved by nature that it can outlast empires, civilizations, entire epochs of human history. The honey that sweetened a pharaoh's tea could theoretically sweeten yours tonight. The honey that dripped from a comb in ancient Mesopotamia would taste just as sweet today as it did 5,000 years ago. This happens because honey has an incredibly low moisture content, usually less than 18%, and is very acidic, with a pH between 3 and 4.5. Bacteria and microorganisms simply can't survive in such an environment. They need water to live, and there isn't enough free water in honey. They need a more neutral pH, and honey is far too acidic for them. It's nature's perfect preservative, sealed in golden amber, waiting patiently through the centuries, through the millennia, utterly unchanged by time. Think about what this means. Honey is one of the few foods that could theoretically last forever. While bread molds, while milk sours, while even preserved foods eventually degrade, honey just sits there, golden and eternal. A small piece of immortality that bees make without even trying, without even knowing what they've created. There's something profoundly peaceful about that thought. In a world where everything changes, where everything eventually fades and falls apart, honey remains constant, reliable, sweet. And speaking of those bees who make this eternal sweetness, let me tell you about the incredible journey involved in creating just 1 pound of honey. To make a single pound, bees need to visit about 2 million flowers. 2 million. Let that number wash over you like a warm wave. Don't try to imagine it all at once. Just think about the journey involved in that. Thousands of bees, each one visiting hundreds of flowers throughout their short lives, all working together in perfect harmony to create something sweet for their hive. Each little bee flies from bloom to bloom, landing delicately on petals, gathering nectar drop by precious drop. She tastes each flower, tests it, decides if it's worth visiting. Some flowers are richer in nectar than others, some smell sweeter, some are easier to access. The bee learns these things, she remembers them. She flies purposefully, efficiently, making choices about where to spend her limited time and energy. And all of this happens while you sleep, while you dream, while the world turns quietly in the darkness. Somewhere right now, even as you're listening to this, bees are visiting flowers under the moonlight in some part of the world, beginning their ancient dance all over again. In a meadow in Europe where dawn is just breaking, bees are stirring in their hive, preparing for another day of flight. In an Australian garden where afternoon sun is warm and bright, bees are at their peak activity, moving from flower to flower with purpose and grace. The work never stops, season after season, year after year. The bees keep flying, keep gathering, keep making honey. Now here's something that might make you appreciate that spoonful of honey in your tea even more. A single bee will produce only about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her entire lifetime. 1/12 of a teaspoon. Such a tiny amount from so much work. If you were to hold that amount in a spoon, you'd barely see it. It would be a thin film of golden liquid, hardly enough to taste, certainly not enough to sweeten anything, and yet that represents an entire life's work. Think about that dedication, that singular purpose. A bee doesn't worry about how small her contribution seems. She doesn't compare herself to others, doesn't wonder if her efforts matter. She just does her part, trust the colony, and together they create abundance. There's something deeply peaceful about that thought, isn't there? We all play our small parts, add our tiny drops to the world, and somehow it all comes together into something sweet. Each of us might feel like we're contributing so little, like our efforts barely matter in the grand scheme of things. But just like those bees, our small contributions add up. They combine with others. They create something larger than any individual could make alone. The word honey itself is ancient and beautiful. It comes from the Old English word hunig, which sounds warm and round in your mouth when you say it. Before that, it traces back to a Proto-Germanic word that sounds like hunangam. If you go back even further, diving deeper into linguistic history, you find Proto-Indo-European roots meaning golden or yellow. Across languages and centuries, across vastly different cultures that had no contact with each other, humans have always associated honey with gold, with sunshine, with warmth. Our ancestors in cold northern Europe called it by a name that meant golden. Our ancestors in sunny Mediterranean climates did the same. People in Asia, in Africa, in every corner of the world where humans encountered honey, they saw what we still see, that liquid light in a jar. They knew it was special. They gave it names that reflected its colour, its value, its beauty. The word itself sounds soft, feels sweet even to say. Honey. Let the word melt on your tongue like the substance it describes. H-O-N-E-Y. It's gentle. It doesn't have harsh consonants or sharp sounds. It flows just like honey flows. Even the language we use to describe it has been shaped by what it is. We don't say honey falls or drops. We say it drizzles, it flows, it oozes. The words we use are slow and thick, just like honey itself. Ancient civilizations knew something that modern medicine has only recently rediscovered, only recently begun to understand fully. Honey heals wounds. The Egyptians used it, applying honey to injuries with the care and reverence of a sacred medicine. The Greeks used it, their physicians writing detailed instructions about which types of honey to use for which types of wounds. Warriors and healers across the ancient world would pack honey into injuries, cover them with honey-soaked bandages, trust in its power to prevent infection and speed healing. And they were right to do so. Honey has natural antibacterial properties, powerful ones. It draws moisture away from wounds through osmosis, creates an inhospitable environment for bacteria. The bacteria literally cannot survive in contact with honey. Beyond that, honey releases small amounts of hydrogen peroxide, the same substance we use in modern medicine to disinfect wounds. The bees put it there, not intentionally, but as a natural byproduct of the enzymes they add to nectar when transforming it into honey. Imagine ancient physicians working by candlelight in the cool evening, carefully applying golden honey to a soldier's wound. They don't fully understand why it works, can't see the bacteria being killed, can't measure the hydrogen peroxide being released. But they trust in the wisdom of generations. Their teachers taught them, and their teachers were taught by their teachers, going back and back through time. The knowledge was preserved not because they understood the mechanism, but because they could see the results. Wounds treated with honey healed faster, got infected less often. That was enough. Observation and experience were their science, and it served them well. That same healing power exists in every jar today, sitting quietly in your cupboard, waiting. Modern hospitals have rediscovered this ancient wisdom. Medical-grade honey is used in wound care centres, in burn units, in places where traditional antibiotics sometimes fail, when antibiotic-resistant bacteria won't respond to drugs. Sometimes honey still works. The bacteria haven't evolved resistance to honey, because honey attacks them in multiple ways simultaneously. It's not a single drug, but a complex mixture of compounds working together. Evolution can't keep up with that complexity. Not all honey tastes the same, and here's why. The nectar that bees collect comes from different flowers, and each flower, each type of plant, gives the honey its own unique flavour, its own colour, its own aroma. Clover honey, probably the most common in North America, tastes mild and sweet, almost buttery, with a light golden colour that seems to glow when you hold it up to the light. Buckwheat honey is dark and rich, almost black sometimes, with a molasses-like depth that coats your mouth and stays with you. Orange blossom honey carries the essence of citrus groves, light and fragrant, tasting like sunshine and Florida mornings. Lavender honey from Provence is delicate, floral, slightly herbal, tasting purple, if purple had a taste. Imagine the bees travelling through a lavender field in the south of France, the purple flowers stretching to the horizon, the air heavy with scent. Each bee lands on a lavender spike, works her way up the tiny flowers, gathering nectar that tastes of essential oils and French summer. Or picture bees crossing wild blueberry barrens in Maine, low bushes spreading across the landscape, small white flowers giving way to berries, the bees working methodically through the blooms. Or think of eucalyptus forests in Australia, tall trees with peeling bark and strange flowers, bees navigating through the canopy, gathering nectar that tastes of menthol and wilderness. Each landscape, each ecosystem, each type of flower leaves its fingerprint on the honey. When you taste honey, you're tasting a place, a season, a moment in time captured in amber sweetness. You're tasting the soil those flowers grew in, the rain that fell that spring, the sunshine of that particular summer. You're tasting geography and weather and botany all mixed together in liquid form. A jar of honey from your local beekeeper tastes different from a jar from across the country, and both taste different from honey from another continent. Each one is unique, unrepeatable, a snapshot of a specific time and place. Now here's something that might sound less romantic but is actually fascinating when you think about it. Honey is, technically speaking, bee vomit. But don't let that disturb your peaceful state. Let me explain gently, because once you understand the process, you'll see how beautiful it actually is. When a bee collects nectar from a flower, she doesn't swallow it into her regular stomach. Instead, she stores it in a special extra stomach called a honey stomach, or crop. This is separate from her digestive stomach. She can hold almost her body weight in this honey stomach, filling it up until she's heavy and round. Then she flies back to the hive, this tiny creature, carrying a massive load, working her wings hard to stay aloft. Back at the hive, she finds another bee and regurgitates this nectar to her. But it's not like vomiting as we think of it. It's gentle, controlled, purposeful. The second bee takes the nectar into her own honey stomach, holds it for a while, then regurgitates it to another bee. And so on, passing it from bee to bee to bee. This process is called trophallaxis, which is a beautiful word for a beautiful process. With each transfer, something magical happens. Each bee adds enzymes from special glands in her body. These enzymes are proteins that act as catalysts, speeding up chemical reactions. They break down the complex sugars in the nectar, the sucrose, into simpler sugars, glucose and fructose. They're transforming it, alchemizing it, turning flower juice into something more stable, more concentrated, more perfect. What starts as watery, perishable nectar becomes thick, eternal honey through the chemistry of the bees' own bodies. It's a collaboration in the truest sense. No single bee makes honey, the forager doesn't make it. The house bee doesn't make it. They make it together, each one adding her contribution, each one changing the nectar a little bit more, pushing it further along its journey from flower to food. What might sound unappetizing is actually one of nature's most elegant collaborative processes, an assembly line of transformation that turns the temporary into the eternal. Once the nectar has been passed from bee to bee, enriched with enzymes, partially transformed, it's deposited into the honeycomb cells. But the work isn't done yet. The nectar is still too watery to be honey, still has too much moisture content. If they sealed it up now, it would ferment, would spoil, would ruin. So the bees do something remarkable. They fan their wings over the honeycomb, creating a gentle breeze that evaporates the excess water. Picture this: thousands of bees, wings beating in coordinated rhythm, creating airflow through the hive. They organize themselves into patterns, some fanning near the entrance to draw fresh air in, others positioned throughout the hive to keep the air moving. The sound would be like a soft hum, a lullaby of industry, a white noise of productivity. They fan and fan, hour after hour, sometimes for days, until the water content drops from about 70% down to less than 18%. Only then is it truly honey. Only then does it have that thick consistency, that eternal shelf life, that perfect preservation. And only then do the bees seal the cell with a thin cap of wax, white and delicate, preserving their creation. Each capped cell is like a little time capsule, a small container of summer that will last forever, that will feed the hive through winter, that will sustain the colony when flowers no longer bloom and the world is cold and bare. Cave paintings in Spain, over 8,000 years old, show humans collecting honey from wild bee colonies. These ancient images painted on stone walls deep in caves show stick figures climbing what appear to be cliffs or trees, reaching into crevices, smoke billowing around them to calm the bees. The paintings are simple but clear in their meaning. Even 8,000 years ago, even before the dawn of what we call civilization, humans knew honey was worth the risk. They knew it was worth climbing dangerous heights, worth enduring bee stings, worth the effort and pain. These ancient artists used charcoal and ochre to capture these scenes on cave walls, sharing the knowledge with their community, teaching the next generation where honey could be found and how to get it. They painted these scenes not as decoration, but as education, as important information about survival and bounty. That same desire for honey beats in us today, unchanged across millennia, unchanged across the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We still want honey. We still value it. We still see it as something precious, something worth having. Even before agriculture, before humans planted crops and domesticated animals, before we had cities or writing or any of the trappings of what we call civilization, we had honey. It was one of the few concentrated sources of sweetness available to our ancient ancestors. No sugar cane, no sugar beets, no corn syrup, just honey and occasionally tree sap or very ripe fruit. Honey was the sweetness in their lives, the treat that made hard lives a little more bearable, the reward that made the risk worthwhile. A strong, healthy hive can produce 60 pounds of honey in a year, sometimes even more in an exceptional season with good weather and plentiful flowers. 60 pounds. That's the result of millions of flower visits, millions of wing beats, millions of flights back and forth between hive and field. It's the coordinated effort of 20,000 to 80,000 bees, depending on the time of year, all working together toward this common goal. Think about the patience required for this. The bees don't rush. They can't rush. They follow the rhythm of flowers blooming, of seasons changing, of sun rising and setting. They work through spring and summer, knowing instinctively, without thinking about it, that winter will come. They know they need to prepare, need to store enough food to survive the cold months when no flowers bloom and flight is impossible. They trust that their efforts will sustain the colony through the barren time. There's a lesson in that steady, seasonal rhythm. Nature doesn't hurry, yet everything gets accomplished. The bees don't stress about deadlines or quotas. They don't worry about whether they're producing enough. They just work, day after day, following the ancient pattern written into their very DNA, trusting the process that has sustained their species for 100 million years. There's a deep peace in that kind of trust, in that kind of purposeful work without anxiety. Inside every spoonful of honey are compounds called antioxidants, particularly flavonoids and phenolic acids. These are complex molecules with multiple ring structures, with hydroxyl groups positioned just right to grab onto free radicals and neutralize them. Free radicals are unstable molecules in your body that can damage cells, contribute to aging, increase inflammation, potentially lead to disease. The antioxidants in honey help protect your cells from this damage, like tiny guardians working quietly in your body, cleaning up, protecting, maintaining. The darker the honey, generally the more antioxidants it contains. That deep, almost black buckwheat honey that's so rich and strong tasting, it's packed with antioxidants, full of protective compounds. But even the lightest, most delicate acacia honey, so pale it's almost clear, has these beneficial compounds. Every time people have eaten honey throughout history, they've been getting this subtle benefit, even when they didn't know such things as antioxidants existed, even when they couldn't measure or quantify these effects. Ancient people didn't know about antioxidants or free radicals or cellular damage. They just knew that honey seemed to make people feel better, seemed to contribute to health and vitality. They observed and concluded, building knowledge through experience across generations. Modern science gives us the mechanisms, the explanations, the precise chemical names for what's happening, but the effect was there all along, working quietly, benefiting humanity for thousands of years before we could explain it. Here's something wonderfully whimsical, something that seems almost like fiction but is absolutely real. When a bee finds a good source of flowers, when she discovers a meadow full of blooms or a garden rich with nectar, she doesn't just go back to the hive and somehow tell the other bees about it. No, she performs a dance. Yes, a dance. It's called the waggle dance, and it's one of the most sophisticated forms of non-human communication we know of. One of the most remarkable examples of animal intelligence in the natural world. The bee waggles her body in a figure-8 pattern on the vertical surface of the honeycomb. Other bees gather around her in the darkness of the hive, touching her with their antennae, feeling the vibrations of her dance, interpreting the information. The angle of her waggle run, the straight part of the figure 8, relative to straight up, which represents the direction of the sun, tells her sisters which direction to fly. If she waggles straight up, the flowers are in the direction of the sun. If she waggles 45 degrees to the right of vertical, the flowers are 45 degrees to the right of the sun's position. And the duration of her waggle tells them how far away the flowers are. A short waggle means nearby, maybe a few hundred meters. A long waggle means distant, perhaps a mile or more. The more excited she is, the more vigorous her dance, the better the food source. She's creating a map through movement, through rhythm, through a physical language that transcends words or written symbols. It's navigation through choreography, information through dance, knowledge through body language. Other bees watch this dance, learn from it, memorize the angle and the duration. Then they fly off, orienting themselves to the sun, flying the correct angle for the correct distance, and finding the flowers themselves. It works. They arrive at the location she indicated, find the flowers, gather their own nectar, and return to dance their own dances if the source is good enough. Information spreads through the colony through this beautiful physical language of movement. You don't need to refrigerate honey. In fact, you shouldn't. When honey gets cold, several things happen. All of them undesirable if you want to use it. It becomes much thicker, almost solid at very low temperatures. It crystallizes faster, the glucose separating out and forming crystals that change the texture. It becomes harder to pour, harder to measure, harder to spread. Honey is happiest at room temperature, sitting in your pantry, always ready, always waiting patiently for you to need it. This is part of why honey was so valuable to our ancestors, why it was treasured in times before modern technology. They didn't have refrigeration. They couldn't keep most foods fresh for long. Meat would spoil within days. Milk would sour quickly. Even preserved foods, salted or dried, would eventually degrade, would eventually become unsafe or unpalatable. But honey just sat there, reliable, unchanging, sweet, It didn't need any special storage. It didn't require any particular conditions. You could keep it in a clay pot, in a gourd, in any container that kept it sealed, and it would last forever. A jar of honey was like having a little piece of eternal summer in your home, no matter how cold the winter outside, no matter how long since flowers last bloomed, when everything else had been consumed, when the stored grain was running low and the preserved vegetables were nearly gone. Honey remained, sweet and dependable and pure. Speaking of crystallization, let's talk about that for a moment, because many people think their honey has gone bad when it crystallizes, when it turns from that clear flowing liquid into something cloudy and thick and solid. But it hasn't gone bad. This is a natural process that happens when the glucose in honey, which is less soluble than the fructose, separates from the water and forms crystals. It's still perfectly good honey, still perfectly safe to eat, still carrying all the same properties and benefits. Some people actually prefer crystallized honey, and once you try it, you might understand why. It spreads like butter, smooth and thick, perfect on toast or biscuits. It doesn't drip or run or make a mess. It has a slightly different texture on the tongue, almost creamy, with a subtle graininess that some find pleasant. The flavour is the same, the sweetness unchanged, just the physical form is different. And if you want it liquid again, the transformation is simple and gentle. Just warm it. Set the jar in warm water, not boiling, just comfortably warm, and watch the crystals slowly dissolve. Watch the honey returning to its flowing state. It's like ice melting into water, like winter turning to spring, like nature moving from one phase to another. The honey doesn't mind. It flows between these states easily, adaptably, patient with whatever form circumstances require. In many ancient cultures, honey was so valuable, so prized, that it was used as currency. In 11th century Germany, German peasants paid their feudal lords in honey and beeswax instead of coins. The lords accepted this payment because honey and wax were as good as gold, maybe better. You could eat honey, use it for medicine, trade it for other goods. Wax could be made into candles, used in religious ceremonies, shaped into seals for documents. These were practical, useful forms of wealth. In ancient Egypt, honey was a standard unit of value, used in trade and taxation just like we use money today. Temple records and tomb inscriptions list quantities of honey as measures of wealth, as payments for services, as offerings to gods. To have honey meant you had something precious, something everyone wanted, something that spoke of warm summer days even in the depths of winter. Think about that. Honey was wealth, liquid gold in the most literal sense. It represented the labour of thousands of bees, the blooming of countless flowers, the passing of seasons. It was valuable not through artificial scarcity or social agreement, like gold coins, but through genuine utility. People wanted honey because it was genuinely useful, genuinely beneficial, genuinely sweet. Its value was intrinsic, built into what it was, not assigned by society or government. When a bee is out foraging, flying from the hive to distant flowers and back again, she travels at about 15 miles per hour. That's not terribly fast by human standards. You walk at about 3 to 4 miles per hour. A casual bicycle ride is faster than a flying bee. But the bee isn't trying to set speed records. She's not in a hurry in the way we understand hurry. She's thorough, she's efficient. She visits 50 to 100 flowers on each trip, landing on each one, testing the nectar, drinking what she can carry, then moving to the next. Over her lifetime, a foraging bee might fly a total distance equivalent to 1.5 times around the world. All those miles, all that journey, contained within a radius of just a few miles from the hive. She doesn't see it as work, though. She doesn't wake up, if bees can be said to wake up, and think, oh no, another day of flying. It's just what she does, what she was born to do, what every instinct in her tiny body compels her to do. There's a kind of purpose we might envy in our quieter moments, a clarity of mission that humans often spend their whole lives searching for. The bee knows what she's supposed to do. She doesn't question it. She doesn't wonder if she should be doing something else, if there's some better or more fulfilling way to spend her time. She flies, she gathers, she returns, simple, pure, complete. Modern research has confirmed what grandmothers have known forever, what has been passed down through generations of folk wisdom and home remedies. Honey can soothe a cough. Studies have shown, with scientific rigor and statistical analysis, that honey can be as effective as some over-the-counter cough suppressants, particularly for children over 1 year old. It coats the throat, providing a protective layer that reduces irritation. Its antimicrobial properties might even help fight the infection causing the cough, attacking the bacteria or viruses at their source. So those folk remedies, honey and lemon tea before bed, a spoonful of honey taken straight when your throat is sore, honey mixed with warm milk or chamomile, they weren't just comfort. They weren't just tradition or superstition or something to make you feel cared for. They were medicine. They were effective treatment based on generations of observation and experience. Sometimes the old ways knew things that science takes decades to rediscover, to measure, to validate. Our great-grandmothers didn't need double-blind studies or peer-reviewed papers. They gave their sick children honey and watched them get better. They took honey themselves when they were ill and felt relief. That was enough. The knowledge was preserved and passed down not because someone could explain the mechanism, but because it worked. Results mattered more than understanding. Here's something circular and beautiful, something that shows how perfectly designed the hive system is. Bees eat honey, consuming it for energy, for fuel to power their activities, and then special glands in their abdomen triggered by this consumption secrete tiny flakes of wax. These wax scales are thin and delicate, almost like snowflakes, and the bees carefully remove them and chew them, mixing the wax with saliva to make it pliable. They use this wax to build the honeycomb, those perfect hexagonal cells where they'll store more honey. So honey makes wax, and wax stores honey. It's a perfect cycle, a closed loop of production and storage that sustains itself. The bees eat about 8 pounds of honey to produce just 1 pound of wax, which seems inefficient until you realize that they need that wax to structure their entire world. The honeycomb is their architecture, their art, their filing system, their nursery, their pantry, their library of sweetness, all rolled into one. Without wax, they'd have no way to organize the hive, no way to store honey efficiently, no way to raise young bees properly. The wax is worth the cost. In New Zealand, far away on islands in the South Pacific, there grows a scrubby, hardy bush called manuka. It has small, prickly leaves and white or light pink flowers that bloom in the spring. Bees visit these flowers and create a type of honey called manuka honey, and this honey has properties that go beyond regular honey, that make it special even among the many special varieties of honey in the world. Manuka honey has extra antibacterial properties, stronger and more potent than most other honeys, due to a compound called methyl glyoxal. This compound is present in small amounts in all honey, but Manuka honey has it in much higher concentrations. The result is honey so powerful, so effective at fighting bacteria, that it's used in medical-grade wound dressings, in hospitals, in serious healthcare settings, where lives may depend on preventing infection. Manuka honey is rated by its MgO content, methyl glyoxal, and the higher the number, the stronger the antibacterial effect. Some medical-grade Manuka honey has MgO ratings in the thousands, making it powerful enough to fight even antibiotic-resistant bacteria. What the bees create from these particular flowers, from this specific plant in this specific region of the world, has measurable, documented healing properties that exceed what bees normally produce. It's a reminder that the natural world still holds secrets, still offers gifts that human chemistry struggles to replicate, still surprises us with its generosity. The colour of honey ranges from almost water white, so pale you can barely tell it apart from pure water, to dark brown, nearly black, so opaque you can't see through it at all. Generally, the lighter the colour, the milder the flavour, and the darker the colour, the stronger, more robust the flavour. Light honey tends to be more delicate, subtle, with gentle sweetness that doesn't overpower. Dark honey tends to be bold, rich, with complex flavours that remind you of molasses or caramel or dark sugar. But there are exceptions to every rule, surprises and variations that make honey endlessly interesting. Some light honeys have distinctive, strong flavours. Some dark honeys are surprisingly mild. It depends on the flowers, always on the flowers. This colour comes from the minerals and compounds in the nectar, which vary depending on what the bees visited, the soil those flowers grew in, the nutrients available to the plants, the specific chemistry of that type of flower. All of this affects the final colour of the honey. When you look at a jar of honey and see that particular shade of amber or gold or mahogany, you're seeing the landscape the bees flew through. You're seeing the geology beneath those fields, the chemistry of that specific place. You're seeing the rain that fell that spring, because more rain means more dilute nectar, which can affect the final product. You're seeing the sunshine of that summer, because sun affects how flowers produce nectar. You're seeing temperature patterns, seeing seasonal variations, seeing the unique combination of factors that will never happen in exactly the same way again. Every jar is a little different, a unique expression of a place and time unrepeatable and precious. While we're thinking about bees and their remarkable bodies, here's a gentle fact about their anatomy. Bees have 5 eyes, not 2 like us. 3 small ones on top of their head, arranged in a triangle called ocelli or simple eyes, and 2 large compound eyes on the sides of their head, the ones you notice when you look at a bee up close. Those compound eyes are made up of thousands of tiny lenses, thousands of individual receptors all working together. Each lens, each ommatidium as scientists call them, sees a small part of the world, and the bee's brain assembles all these pieces into a complete picture. It's like having thousands of tiny eyes instead of 2 large ones, creating an image that's different from how we see, an image we can barely imagine. These compound eyes let the bee see in ultraviolet light, wavelengths invisible to human eyes. Many flowers have patterns visible only in UV light, like runway lights on an airport runway, guiding the bees to nectar. A flower that looks plain yellow to us might have elaborate patterns to a bee, bullseyes or stripes or spots that say, "Land here, the nectar is here." The bees fly through a world we can barely imagine, seeing colours we've never seen, perceiving patterns invisible to us. The flowers have learned to speak to the bees in colours we can't speak, and the bees have learned to read messages we can't read. It's a conversation in light that's been happening for millions of years, evolving together, plant and insect, flower and pollinator, each shaping the other, each adapting to the other until they fit together perfectly. When archaeologists opened King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, when they first stepped into chambers that had been sealed for over 3,000 years, among the treasures they found were sealed jars of honey. Picture the scene. Howard Carter and his team working in the Valley of the Kings, carefully cataloguing the incredible wealth buried with the boy pharaoh. Gold everywhere, jewels, intricate artwork, furniture, chariots, weapons. And among all this splendour, tucked away with the other provisions for the afterlife, were simple clay jars sealed with wax and resin. When they opened these jars, perhaps expecting them to be empty or filled with dust or something long since degraded, they found honey. After more than 3,000 years in that sealed tomb, that honey was still perfectly preserved, still golden, still sweet, still edible if anyone had been brave or curious enough to try it. Imagine the person who harvested that honey all those centuries ago. She or he probably tended bees in the Egyptian countryside, perhaps near the Nile where flowers grew thick in the fertile soil. They worked through the season, collecting honey, processing it, storing it in jars. Then the young pharaoh died, and someone decided this honey, this particular batch, should go with him into the tomb. It was deemed valuable enough, important enough, to be part of his burial goods. That person probably never imagined their honey would last 3,000 years, would outlast their entire civilization, would still be perfectly good millennia after every person they'd ever known had died and turned to dust. They just knew honey was valuable, knew the young pharaoh should have it for his journey into the afterlife. They couldn't have known that their careful work, their standard beekeeping practice would endure so long, would become evidence of honey's eternal nature, would become one of the most powerful demonstrations of just how perfectly preserved honey can remain. Here's a beautiful word, one you might not have heard before: hygroscopic. It means something attracts and absorbs moisture from the air. Honey is hygroscopic, which means it naturally, constantly, pulls water from the atmosphere around it. This is why you should always keep your honey jar sealed tight. Left open, even for a few days, honey will gradually pull water from the air, becoming thinner, more dilute, more likely to ferment as the water content rises above that critical 18% threshold. But this same property, this tendency to grab moisture from wherever it can find it, makes honey wonderful in baking. It keeps cakes moist long after a cake made with sugar would have dried out. It keeps cookies soft and tender. It keeps bread from going stale as quickly. The honey pulls moisture from the air into the food, keeping it fresh longer, keeping it appealing longer. Even in cooking, honey is still doing what it does naturally, drawing in, holding on, preserving. Bakers figured this out long before anyone understood the science of hygroscopy. They just noticed that honey cakes stayed moist, stayed good, stayed edible longer than other cakes. They observed the result and adjusted their recipes accordingly, creating traditions of honey baking that have lasted centuries. In the heart of every hive is a queen bee, and she's the mother of nearly every bee in the colony. She's larger than the other bees, with a longer, more elegant abdomen. She moves through the hive with purpose, attended always by a retinue of workers who feed her, groom her, care for her every need, and she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day during peak season in spring and early summer. 2,000 eggs. That's more than her own body weight in eggs every single day. That's her entire life's purpose, her only job really, to ensure the colony continues, to create the next generation of bees who will make honey, who will forage and build and defend. The queen is the source of the colony's future, the mother of its identity, the genetic heart that determines what kind of bees they'll be. The queen is larger than the other bees, but she's not really in charge in the way we think of queens or rulers. She doesn't make decisions for the hive. She doesn't direct operations or give orders. The colony is more like a democracy with decisions emerging from the collective action of many individuals. But the queen is still the center, still the heart that keeps the whole golden operation beating. And she lives longer too, sometimes 4 or 5 years, while worker bees live only a few weeks or months depending on the season. The whole hive revolves around her, protects her, feeds her. Without her, the colony would slowly die out, unable to replace the bees that age and wear out. In 1984, honey went to space aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. Astronauts took it with them on their mission, packed carefully among their supplies. Why honey? Because honey is the perfect space food when you think about it. It doesn't spoil, ever, so it doesn't need any special preservation beyond a sealed container. It doesn't need refrigeration, which saves precious power and space. It provides quick energy, which is useful when you're working in the demanding environment of space, and it stays stable in zero gravity, doesn't float away in droplets the way water might, doesn't create a mess. So honey, this substance bees have been making for 100 million years, this ancient sweetness that sustained our ancestors, has travelled beyond Earth, has orbited our planet, has floated in the cosmos looking down at the blue marble where it originated. From flowers to space, from the smallest insect following ancient instincts, to the grandest human achievement of reaching beyond our world, honey connects it all. Astronauts floating in the space station, looking down at Earth, seeing the continents and oceans spread out below, eating honey that tastes like summer, like home, like the planet they temporarily left behind. The same honey that sweetened tea in ancient Egypt, sweetening the meals of space travelers in the modern age. Continuity across time, across space, across the entire span of human civilization. Raw honey, the kind that hasn't been filtered or heated or processed much, contains tiny grains of pollen. These microscopic specks of plant material, so small you might not even notice them, carry their own benefits for human health. But they also serve as a kind of fingerprint, a signature, a record of exactly where the honey came from. Scientists can examine the pollen in honey under a microscope, identify the species of plants represented, and tell you exactly where the honey originated. They can tell you which flowers the bees visited most often. They can tell you the general geography of the hive, what kind of landscape surrounded it, what time of year the honey was made. Each grain of pollen is like a tiny signature, an autograph from a flower saying, "I was here, I contributed to this sweetness. I'm part of this honey's story. This technique, called melissopolanology, is used to verify the origin of expensive or specialty honeys, to ensure that what's labelled as New Zealand Manuka honey really came from New Zealand Manuka bushes, or that Tasmanian leatherwood honey really came from Tasmania. It's forensics for honey, detective work using pollen as evidence, using the bee's own record keeping to verify claims and origins. Here's something that might surprise you, that surprises most people when they first learn it. Honeybees aren't native to North or South America. They're not indigenous to the New World at all. European colonists brought them over in the 1600s, transported them on ships across the Atlantic, imported them like they imported wheat and cattle and apple trees. Native Americans, seeing these insects for the first time, called them white man's flies, because they appeared alongside European settlers, because they were as foreign to the landscape as the Europeans themselves. These bees spread across the continent, sometimes moving ahead of the actual colonial frontier, establishing wild colonies in tree hollows and cliff faces, making honey in the American wilderness. Before honeybees, the Americas had other pollinators, and they still exist. Today, native bees, hundreds of species of them, plus butterflies, moths, birds, bats. These are all still crucial to ecosystems, still pollinate native plants, still play essential roles. But the honeybee, this immigrant species, has become so integrated into American landscapes, so common, so seemingly natural, that most people assume they've always been here. They've made the Americas their home, adapted to local conditions, become part of the fabric of the land, just as humans from all over the world have done. Think about this for a moment, and let it settle over you gently like a soft blanket. Honey found in ancient tombs, honey that's thousands of years old, is still good, still edible, still sweet. But the civilizations that produced it are gone. The Egyptian dynasties have fallen, replaced by Greeks, then Romans, then Arabs, then Ottomans, then British, then independent modern Egypt. The languages have changed completely. The borders have been redrawn 100 times. The very names of cities have changed. Everything human has transformed, evolved, disappeared, been replaced. But the honey remains, unchanged, unimpressed by history, unconcerned with the rise and fall of empires. There's something humbling about that, something that puts our human concerns in perspective. Human empires rise and fall, but this simple substance made by insects following instinct outlasts them all. It makes you think about what truly endures, doesn't it? Not power, not conquest, not even civilization really, but simple things, sweetness, sustenance, the patient work of bees in summer sun. Scientists have identified over 300 different compounds in honey, over 300 distinct chemicals, each playing some role in what makes honey honey. There are sugars, of course, primarily glucose and fructose, but also sucrose, maltose, and others in smaller amounts. There are minerals, potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, sodium, iron, manganese, copper, zinc. There are vitamins, particularly B vitamins, in small quantities. There are enzymes, proteins that catalyze reactions that transform nectar into honey, invertase, diastase, glucose oxidase. There are antioxidants, flavonoids, phenolic acids, compounds with complex names and complex structures. There are amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. There are organic acids that give honey its low pH, gluconic acid primarily, but also formic acid, acetic acid, citric acid. The exact composition varies with every batch, depending on the flowers, the season, the weather, the soil. No two batches of honey are exactly the same, any more than any two snowflakes are exactly the same. Each one is a unique chemical signature, as distinct as a fingerprint or a genetic sequence. When you eat honey, you're consuming something impossibly complex, something humans couldn't fully recreate in a laboratory, no matter how hard we tried, no matter how advanced our chemistry becomes. We could synthesize most of the individual compounds, sure. We could mix glucose and fructose in the right proportions, add some minerals, some acids, but we couldn't replicate the exact combination of hundreds of compounds in their precise ratios, couldn't capture the subtle variations, couldn't make something that tastes and acts exactly like honey. Nature's formulas remain superior to our own, remain more sophisticated than our best efforts. Inside the hive, bees maintain a nearly constant temperature of 93 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of what the temperature outside might be. In summer, when it might be 100 degrees in the shade, the hive stays at 95. In winter, when it might be below zero, the hive stays at 93. This precision is remarkable. This dedication to maintaining the perfect environment. They do this through collective action, thousands of bees working together. In summer, when it's too hot, bees fan their wings to cool the hive, creating air currents that carry heat away. Some bees even collect water and spread it around the hive, then fan it to create evaporative cooling, like a primitive air conditioning system. In winter, when it's cold, bees cluster together in a tight ball, vibrating their wing muscles without actually moving their wings, generating heat through muscular action. The bees on the outside of the cluster slowly rotate toward the inside, ensuring everyone gets time in the warm center, ensuring no bee freezes. Think about that precision, that dedication to maintaining the exact right temperature. The colony works together as a single organism, as one large creature made of many small individuals, regulating temperature like a warm-blooded animal, all to protect the developing larvae in their cells and to keep the honey at the right consistency. The hive breathes, adjusts, maintains balance through thousands of small actions by individual bees, all working in harmony, all contributing their tiny part to the collective whole. If you add water to honey and let it ferment, you get mead, perhaps the oldest alcoholic beverage humans ever made, older than wine, older than beer. Our ancestors discovered this accidentally, probably when rain got into a honey pot or a natural honey tree, and wild yeast from the air began to ferment the diluted honey. Someone tasted it and found it pleasant, found it intoxicating, found it worth making intentionally. Mead has been drunk for at least 9,000 years, possibly longer. It was the drink of Vikings, who believed it flowed in the halls of Valhalla. The reward of fallen warriors. It was the drink of Celtic warriors, who drank it before battle for courage and after battle for celebration. It was the drink of ancient Chinese emperors who had special meaderies at the imperial court. Across cultures, across continents, humans discovered independently that honey mixed with water and allowed to ferment creates something wonderful. The word honeymoon comes from the tradition of drinking mead for 1 month, 1 full cycle of the moon after a wedding. The honey month, the sweet month, the beginning of a marriage when everything is still golden and perfect. That sweetness, that golden liquid made by bees, has been part of human celebration and ritual for as long as we've had culture, as long as we've marked life's important transitions with special foods and drinks. Those delicate wings, nearly transparent, so thin you can see through them, beat 200 times every second. 200 beats per second. Try to count that fast in your head. You can't. It's too fast for human consciousness to track. But the bee's wings just go, driven by powerful muscles in her thorax, creating that distinctive buzzing sound we associate with bees and summer and warm, lazy afternoons. That buzzing sound isn't something they make intentionally, isn't a form of communication or warning. It's just the sound of work, of flight, of purpose. It's the sound of wings beating so fast they blur into invisibility, so fast you see only the motion, not the individual beats. 200 beats per second, carrying the bee from flower to flower, from hive to field and back again, creating that sleepy summer sound that humans have listened to for countless generations. That sound that means all is well, that life is happening, that the world is turning as it should. Here's something relevant to why you're listening to this right now. Something that might actually help you sleep better tonight and other nights. Honey can actually improve sleep. There's science behind this, mechanisms we can point to and explain. Consuming a small amount of honey before bed causes a slight rise in insulin. Just a gentle increase, nothing dramatic. This insulin allows tryptophan to enter the brain more easily. Tryptophan is an amino acid, one of the building blocks of proteins, and it's the precursor to serotonin. Serotonin is then converted to melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep cycles, that tells your body it's time to rest, time to shut down, time to drift into unconsciousness. So honey helps create a chain reaction that ends with better sleep. Honey raises insulin slightly, insulin helps tryptophan enter the brain, tryptophan becomes serotonin, serotonin becomes melatonin, melatonin helps you sleep. So honey and warm milk before bed, that classic folk remedy, was onto something. Honey and chamomile tea, another traditional sleep aid, makes sense physiologically. These folk remedies were correct, were based on accurate observation even without understanding the mechanism. The bees, in their infinite industry, were making not just sweetness, not just energy, but rest, but peace, but eventually sleep. How perfect that this script about honey is designed to help you sleep, and honey itself wants to help you sleep too. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The bees work in summer sunshine, flying through warm afternoons, gathering sweetness from flowers, creating honey, and then that honey helps you rest, helps you sleep, helps you dream. Work and rest, activity and sleep, sun and moon, all connected through honey. Beyond their famous waggle dance, bees communicate through scent, through chemical signals called pheromones. These are invisible messages, aromatic information, scent-based language that creates a constant conversation throughout the hive. The queen releases pheromones that keep the colony cohesive, that tell the workers she's healthy and present and laying eggs. These pheromones say, all is well, continue your work, the colony is strong. Guard bees release alarm pheromones when the hive is threatened, when a predator approaches or something disturbs the entrance. These pheromones smell like bananas, strangely enough, like artificial banana flavoring. They trigger aggression in other bees, call them to defense, prepare the colony to fight. Within seconds, hundreds or thousands of bees can be mobilized by this invisible chemical message. Worker bees release pheromones that identify the hive, that mark flowers they've visited, that coordinate activities. It's a chemical language, invisible to us but rich with meaning for the bees. They live in a cloud of scent and signal, always aware of each other's states and needs through smell. The hive thinks and feels collectively through these aromatic messages, each bee both individual and part of something larger, each bee both herself and part of the whole. Because of honey's high sugar content and very low water content, it never freezes solid, even at very low temperatures. You could put honey in a freezer at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, leave it there for months, and when you take it out, it won't be a solid block of ice. It will be very thick, very slow moving, almost like cold taffy, but it won't be frozen solid. You could still pour it, eventually, given enough time and patience. This meant that in cold climates, before modern refrigeration, before people could keep things frozen on purpose, honey was one of the few sweet things available through winter. Fruits would freeze solid, become icy and unusable. Stored root vegetables would freeze if not kept carefully in cellars. Even preserved foods could freeze, becoming hard and difficult to use. But honey just became thick, still usable, still sweet, still available. A little bit of summer preserved in golden amber, refusing to surrender to winter's grip, refusing to freeze, to solidify, to become unavailable. Honey remains itself through all conditions, through heat and cold, through wet and dry, through every extreme. It's stable in a way few things are, reliable in a way we can count on. Bees make another substance besides honey, something called propolis. It's a sticky resin they collect from tree buds and sap, particularly from poplar and conifer trees. They fly to these trees, gather the resin in their pollen baskets, bring it back to the hive. Then they mix it with beeswax and use it for multiple purposes, to seal cracks in the hive, to smooth out rough spots in the wood or comb, to reduce the size of the entrance in fall and winter, to mummify intruders that are too large to remove. But most importantly, they use it to sterilize cells before the queen lays eggs in them. They coat the inside of each cell with a thin layer of propolis, creating a sterile environment for the developing bee. Propolis has antimicrobial properties even stronger than honey, powerful compounds that kill bacteria, viruses, and fungi. The bees are practicing advanced medicine, advanced hygiene, creating hospital-grade sterile conditions for their young, all through instinct, all through behaviors evolved over millions of years. Humans have discovered propolis too, have found that it benefits us as well. Propolis is used in health supplements, in wound care, in natural remedies for colds and infections. Some people chew propolis like gum, swearing by its health benefits. The bees were using advanced medicine, advanced antiseptics, long before humans existed, long before we understood what germs were or why sterilization mattered. They were sealing their homes with nature's own antiseptic, protecting their young with the most effective substances they could find. Honey appears in so many ancient texts, so many religious and cultural documents, that it's hard to catalogue them all. In the Quran, honey is described as healing for mankind, a substance of benefit and blessing. There's an entire chapter named the bee. In the Bible, the Promised Land is described as flowing with milk and honey, the ultimate image of abundance and blessing. When the Israelites are wandering in the desert, when they're struggling and hungry, The promise that sustains them is of a land flowing with milk and honey. In the ancient Hindu Vedas, some of the oldest religious texts in existence, honey is praised as one of the most important and beneficial substances. It's used in religious ceremonies, offered to gods, given to infants as their first food. In Buddhist texts, stories tell of followers bringing honey to Buddha as the most precious gift they could offer. Across cultures, across continents, across religions that have nothing else in common, humans have looked at what the bees make and seen something divine, something blessed, something special. This universal reverence for honey across so many different cultures suggests something fundamental, something true about honey's nature. It's not just that it's sweet. Sugar is sweet too once we learned how to process it. It's something more than that. Maybe it's honey's complexity, its natural origin, its association with flowers and summer and life abundant. Maybe it's the fact that it never spoils, suggesting something eternal. Maybe it's the mystery of how bees make it, the cooperation of thousands of small creatures creating something greater than themselves. Whatever the reason, honey has been seen as special, as worthy of reverence, for as long as humans have been human. A honeybee's brain is about the size of a sesame seed, tiny almost beyond imagining. You could barely see it with the naked eye. If you held one on your fingertip, you'd hardly feel it. And yet this sesame seed-sized brain can perform complex calculations, can learn and remember, can navigate miles of landscape, can communicate abstract information to other bees through dance, can recognize individual flowers and remember which ones are most rewarding. That tiny brain can count, can understand that visiting the fourth landmark leads to food, can choose the fourth option in a sequence. It can learn by watching other bees, can solve problems, can adapt to new situations. Intelligence isn't always about size. Sometimes it's about efficiency, about evolution perfecting something small until it works perfectly, until it packs tremendous capability into minimal space. The bee doesn't know how remarkable she is. She doesn't marvel at her own intelligence. She just knows flowers, and home, and the work of her wings. When heated, honey caramelizes, develops deep, complex flavors that are different from but related to its original taste. The sugars break down and recombine, creating hundreds of new flavor compounds through the Maillard reaction and caramelization. Chefs use this property in cooking, creating honey caramel sauces, glazes for meat, desserts with rich and sophisticated taste profiles that sugar alone can't match. Honey caramel has a depth, a complexity, a slight bitterness balanced with deep sweetness that makes it special. It tastes expensive, refined, carefully made. The bees made something simple that becomes complex through transformation, through heat, through chemical change, and that transformation happens every time you cook with honey, every time you bake with it, every time you heat it. The compounds shift, rearrange, create new tastes, new aromas, new experiences. Like so many beautiful things in life, honey changes when subjected to heat, becomes something new while still retaining its essential nature. A honey bee colony is entirely female run. The queen is female. All the worker bees are female. They make all the decisions, do all the work, determine the colony's fate. Male bees, called drones, exist only to mate with queens from other hives. They don't collect nectar, don't make honey, don't defend the hive, don't feed the young, don't build comb. They just eat honey and wait for their chance to mate. And when winter comes, when resources become scarce and the colony needs to conserve food to survive the cold months, the female workers actually kick the drones out of the hive. They forcibly evict them, push them out the entrance, refuse to let them back in. The males, unable to forage for themselves, unable to survive alone, die quickly. The females are tolerating male bees when resources are abundant in spring and summer, but dismissed when efficiency matters, when survival is on the line. The hive is a society of sisters, daughters and mothers, all working together, all supporting each other, making collective decisions about the colony's future. Modern burn centres, sophisticated medical facilities with advanced technology and trained specialists have confirmed that honey can be effective in treating burns. It reduces inflammation, fights infection, keeps the wound moist, and can help skin heal with less scarring than some conventional treatments. Medical-grade honey, specially processed and sterilized, is used in hospitals around the world for serious burn treatment, for wounds that won't heal, for situations where traditional antibiotics fail. Ancient healers who applied honey to burns thousands of years ago were doing the right thing, were providing genuinely effective treatment, even if they didn't understand exactly why it worked. They just knew it did. They watched it heal, watched patients improve, watched wounds close and scars fade. They recorded their observations, passed the knowledge down through generations, taught their apprentices this valuable technique. Sometimes observation and experience matter as much as understanding mechanism, maybe more. At the peak of summer, in June and July when flowers are most abundant and the days are longest, a single hive might house 60,000 to 80,000 bees. Imagine that density, that society, that organisation all happening in a box the size of a filing cabinet or a small dresser. 80,000 individuals, each with a role, each contributing, each necessary to the whole. The hive hums with their combined effort, vibrates with their movement, smells of honey and wax and pollen and flowers. It's warm inside, carefully regulated to that perfect 95 degrees. It's dark except where sunlight sneaks in through cracks or the entrance. And in that space, in that darkness, an entire civilization thrives, produces, stores for the future, raises young, maintains order, cooperates in ways that humans struggle to achieve even with all our intelligence and technology. If you could shrink down and walk through a hive at peak summer, you'd see organized chaos everywhere. Bees moving purposefully along comb surfaces, nurse bees feeding larvae, house bees processing nectar, foragers returning with loads of pollen and nectar, bees building new comb, bees fanning to regulate temperature and humidity, bees grooming each other, the queen surrounded by her attendants, eggs being laid, larvae being capped, young bees emerging from cells, everything happening at once, everything coordinated without central control, just thousands of individuals following instinct and responding to local conditions, creating order from apparent chaos. There are estimated to be over 300 unique types of honey in the United States alone, and thousands worldwide. Each one reflects the primary flowers the bees visited, the dominant nectar source in that location during that season. Acacia honey from the black locust tree, delicate and light, barely yellow. Tupelo honey from the swamps of Florida and Georgia, where tupelo trees grow with their roots in water, creating honey so valuable it's sometimes called liquid gold. Sage honey from California, where bees visit white sage and black sage, creating honey that's light and mild with a hint of herb. Heather honey from Scotland, where purple heather covers the moors, creating thick, jelly-like honey with a strong, distinctive taste. Chestnut honey from Europe, dark and slightly bitter, polarizing. People either love it or hate it. Pine honey from Greece, actually made from honeydew, insect secretions on pine trees, rather than flower nectar, dark and rich with a slight resinous taste. Eucalyptus honey from Australia, mentholated and medicinal. Some honeys are so specific, so particular, they can only be made in tiny regions during brief flowering periods. Cedar honey from Yemen, made from the ujub tree, is one of the rarest and most expensive honeys in the world, sometimes selling for hundreds of dollars per kilogram. Manuka honey from New Zealand, made only during the brief Manuka blooming season. Tupelo honey from a small region in the Florida Panhandle where Tupelo trees grow. Each variety tells a story of a specific place, a specific ecosystem, a specific moment in time that will never come again in exactly the same way. Bees see wavelengths of light we can't see, particularly in the ultraviolet range. The world, to a bee, looks different than it does to us. Many flowers have evolved patterns visible only in UV light, evolved specifically to attract bees and other pollinators that can see these wavelengths. These patterns are like landing strips, like signs saying, "The good stuff is here," pointing to where the nectar and pollen are most abundant. To a bee, a simple yellow flower, plain and uniform to our eyes, might have elaborate patterns, bullseyes, stripes, spots, all invisible to us. A white flower might be covered in UV reflecting patterns we can't detect. They navigate a more complex visual world than we do, see subtleties we miss, perceive beauty we can't perceive. The flowers have learned to speak to the bees in colours we can't speak, learned to advertise in a visual language we can't read, and the bees have learned to read messages we can't see. It's a conversation in light that's been happening for millions of years, since the first flowering plants evolved, evolving together, plant and insect, flower and pollinator, each shaping the other, each adapting to the other, co-evolving until they fit together perfectly. Honey contains small amounts of minerals like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. The exact amounts vary by type and origin, but they're there, genuine nutritional benefit beyond just calories and sweetness. When diluted in water, honey can help replenish electrolytes, the minerals and salts your body needs for proper cellular function. This makes it a natural sports drink, a way to rehydrate and restore balance after exertion. Greek Olympians in ancient games ate honey before competitions, believing it gave them strength and endurance. They were right. The quick energy from the sugars combined with the electrolytes and minerals in the honey provided exactly what their bodies needed. Roman gladiators mixed honey with water, creating a recovery drink they consumed after training and fighting. For thousands of years, across different cultures, humans have turned to honey for strength and endurance and recovery, and the bees just keep making it, generation after generation, oblivious to how we use it, following their own purposes, creating abundance we can share. To produce 1 pound of honey, bees collectively fly about 55,000 miles. That's more than twice around the Earth. All those miles, all those journeys, all those individual flights by thousands of bees compressed into a single jar, into a single pound of golden sweetness, Every spoonful of honey represents thousands of miles of flight, thousands of flower visits, millions of wing beats, the combined effort of thousands of bees over weeks or months. When you spread honey on toast, when you stir it into tea, when you drizzle it over yogurt, think about that journey. Think about the distance travelled, the work invested, the cooperation required. You're eating miles, you're tasting effort, you're consuming transformation. Distance transformed into sweetness, flight transformed into food, work transformed into something that gives pleasure and energy to others. There's a kind of alchemy in that, a magic in how labour becomes nourishment, how movement becomes stillness, how summer sunshine becomes something you can store in your pantry through winter. Despite being sweet, honey has a relatively low glycemic index compared to refined sugar. The glycemic index measures how quickly a food raises blood sugar levels. High glycemic foods cause rapid spikes and crashes. Low glycemic foods provide more stable, sustained energy. Honey falls in the middle to low range, significantly better than table sugar or corn syrup. This happens because honey is a mixture of fructose and glucose, and these sugars are absorbed at different rates. The glucose provides quick energy, entering the bloodstream rapidly. The fructose is absorbed more slowly, providing sustained energy over time. Together, they create a more balanced, longer-lasting fuel than sugar alone. This is why athletes use honey for endurance events. Marathon runners, long-distance cyclists, triathletes often carry honey packets or honey-based energy foods. The honey provides quick energy when they need it immediately, then sustained energy to keep them going. The bees, in balancing these sugars for their own needs, for their own purposes, accidentally created the perfect fuel for human endurance activities too. Honeybees have existed for about 100 million years. 100 million. To put that in perspective, humans in our modern form have been around for maybe 300,000 years. Our entire species, all of human history, all of civilization, is just a tiny fraction of how long bees have been making honey. Bees were making honey when dinosaurs walked the earth, when Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops and all those ancient giants lived and died. They've survived ice ages, survived mass extinctions, survived the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs, survived changes to Earth that drove countless species to extinction. They've outlasted countless other species, adapted to every climate except the extreme poles, spread across every continent except Antarctica. And through it all, through all these changes, through all this time, they've kept making honey, following the same basic process, the same fundamental instinct, generation after generation, eon after eon. The process hasn't changed much in 100 million years because it doesn't need to change. It's already perfect, already optimized, already as efficient and effective as it needs to be. Evolution discovered the formula for honey 100 million years ago and has seen no reason to adjust it since. Some people find that eating local honey helps with seasonal allergies. The reasoning behind this folk remedy is that local honey contains small amounts of local pollen from the same plants causing your allergies. By consuming tiny amounts of this pollen regularly, you might help your body build tolerance, might train your immune system to stop overreacting to these substances. The science on this is mixed. Some studies show benefit, others don't. But many people swear by it. claim that eating a spoonful of local honey every day during allergy season reduces their symptoms significantly. There's something appealing about the idea though, isn't there? That the same landscape that triggers your allergies also produces the cure that the bees gathering from those very flowers create a medicine perfectly tailored to where you live. Whether it works through actual immunological tolerance or through placebo effect or through some mechanism we don't fully understand yet, many people find relief. And even if it doesn't help your allergies, you're still eating delicious local honey, still supporting local beekeepers, still connecting to the ecosystem you live in. The hexagonal cells of honeycomb are one of nature's most efficient structures, a marvel of mathematics and engineering that humans studied for centuries before fully understanding. Hexagons use the least amount of material while providing maximum storage space and structural strength. Of all possible shapes that tessellate, fit together with no gaps, hexagons have the highest ratio of area to perimeter. This means the bees use the minimum amount of wax to create the maximum amount of storage space. The honeycomb can support 25 times its own weight. Think about that. If you built a structure from honeycomb, if you could scale it up to human size, it would be incredibly strong relative to its weight. Engineers have copied this design in aerospace applications, in racing car construction, in building materials. Honeycomb panels are used in everything from aircraft wings to floor underlayment because the structure is so efficient, so strong for its weight. The bees build it in darkness, inside the hive where there's little to no light. They can't see what they're building. They use their bodies as measuring tools, use their antennae to gauge distances, use their sense of heat and space and each other's positions. And it comes out perfect every time. Every cell a regular hexagon, every wall the same thickness, every angle precisely 120 degrees. They don't need blueprints or rulers or architecture degrees. They carry the knowledge in their genes, in their instincts, in the collective memory of their species shaped by 100 million years of evolution. Because of its antibacterial properties and low water content, honey can be used to preserve fruit. This was an important technique in ancient times, before refrigeration, before canning, before any modern preservation methods. Ancient cooks would submerge fruit in honey to keep it through the winter, to have fruit when fresh fruit was unavailable. The honey would prevent decay, prevent the growth of bacteria and mold, while also flavouring the fruit with its own sweetness. Imagine opening a jar of honey-preserved fruit in January, in the deep cold of winter when everything outside is frozen and grey. The fruit would taste like summer, like warm days and growing things. It would be transformed by the honey, candied almost, sweet and rich. It's another example of honey as time capsule, as preserver, as a way to capture a moment and keep it. Fruit at the peak of ripeness, at the height of summer perfection, captured in amber, kept perfect for months. When fresh fruit was scarce, when winter supplies were running low, you could open that jar and taste summer again. Studies have shown that bees can recognize and remember human faces. They can be trained to associate certain faces with food rewards, can learn which humans bring them sugar water or open their hive gently, which humans are threats, and they remember. For days afterward, if they see that same face, they remember the association. Imagine that. A creature with a brain the size of a sesame seed, who lives maybe a few months, can look at your face, process what she sees, store that information, retrieve it later. Bees aren't just automatic pollen collecting robots. They're aware, they learn, they remember, they make associations between causes and effects. The bee you see on a flower in your garden might recognize you if she's seen you before, might remember that you're the one who planted those flowers, might adjust her behavior based on past experiences with you. Cleopatra supposedly bathed in milk and honey. Whether this is historical fact or embellished legend is unclear, lost to time and the mythologizing of one of history's most famous figures. But honey has definitely been used in beauty treatments for thousands of years across many cultures. Its moisturizing and antimicrobial properties make it excellent for skin. It hydrates without clogging pores, helps with acne, can soothe irritation, might reduce the appearance of wrinkles. Modern cosmetics still use honey in lotions, shampoos, face masks, soaps. What ancient queens and nobles used for beauty, what was once reserved for the wealthy and powerful, anyone can use now. The same substance that preserves and sweetens also softens and heals skin. Honey is generous with its gifts, multi-talented, useful in so many ways beyond its primary purpose. A bee's antennae aren't just for show, aren't just structural features. They're covered in thousands of sensory receptors, tiny structures that detect smell, taste, touch, humidity, air movement, even electromagnetic fields. The antennae are constantly moving, waving, sampling the air, touching surfaces, gathering information about the world. Through her antennae, a bee experiences the world in ways we can barely imagine. She can smell flowers from miles away, can detect specific chemical signatures in concentrations of parts per billion. She can taste with a touch, running her antennae over a surface and knowing immediately if it's food, if it's a threat, if it's something useful. She can sense the Earth's magnetic field for navigation, can feel minute changes in humidity that signal weather changes. These two delicate appendages, thinner than thread, are entire sensory universes, providing information human senses can't detect. Honey has been used as a hangover remedy for centuries, recommended by ancient physicians and modern grandmothers alike. And there's actually science behind it. The fructose in honey helps the body metabolize alcohol faster, helps clear it from the bloodstream more quickly. The gentle sugars provide energy to a depleted system, help restore blood sugar levels that alcohol might have disrupted. The minerals help restore electrolyte balance, and the overall soothing nature of honey just makes you feel better, makes the discomfort more bearable. Toast with honey and tea, honey water, honey in your breakfast. These folk remedies actually have some science backing them up. The bees, once again, providing exactly what humans need, even when we brought the discomfort on ourselves through our own choices. Honey doesn't judge, it just helps, just soothes, just sweetens whatever it touches. Recent research suggests that individual bees have different personalities, different behavioral tendencies, different styles of doing the same tasks. Some bees are more adventurous, more willing to explore far from the hive, to try new flowers, to take risks. Some are more cautious, more conservative, staying closer to known resources, visiting familiar flowers. Some are faster learners than others, quicker to figure out new problems or changes in their environment. Some are more social, more likely to interact with other bees. Some are more solitary, doing their work alone. Even within the strict social structure of the hive, Even within the constraints of their roles and responsibilities, there's room for individual variation. Each bee isn't just an interchangeable part of a machine, isn't just a worker unit with no identity. She's an individual with slightly different tendencies, slightly different preferences, slightly different ways of approaching the world. The hive is made up of personalities, not just positions, of individuals, not just roles. The antioxidants in honey may help lower blood pressure, may have a modest but measurable effect on cardiovascular health. Studies have shown small reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure in people who regularly consume honey. It's not a dramatic effect, not a replacement for medication when medication is needed, but it's there, it's real, it's measurable. So honey isn't just sweet, isn't just calories and pleasure. It's actually working in your body, providing subtle benefits, supporting health in quiet ways. The ancient idea that honey was medicine, was beneficial beyond just nutrition, wasn't wrong. Ancient people couldn't measure blood pressure, couldn't do controlled studies, couldn't prove their claims with statistics. But they observed that people who ate honey seemed healthier, seemed to thrive. Modern science just gives us the mechanisms, the explanations, the precise measurements of what was happening all along. A queen bee takes one mating flight in her entire life. One flight, one journey into the sky, one chance to collect everything she needs for the rest of her life. She flies up high, higher than she'll ever fly again, into what's called a drone congregation area, where male bees from many hives gather waiting for virgin queens. She mates with multiple drones in mid-air, sometimes 10 or 20 of them, collecting and storing their sperm in a special organ in her body. She'll use this stored sperm to fertilize eggs for the rest of her life, which might be several years. She'll never mate again, never need to. This one flight, this one journey, provides everything she needs genetically for thousands and thousands of offspring. The drones who mate with her die immediately after, their abdomens literally torn apart in the act of mating. It's both beautiful and brutal, this single moment that determines the genetics of thousands of future bees, that shapes the colony's character for years to come. In medieval Europe, particularly in Germany and Poland, in societies that had little money and mostly ran on barter and exchange, peasants paid their rent and taxes in honey and beeswax. The landlords, the nobles, the church, they all accepted this payment because honey and wax were as good as gold, maybe better, because you could actually use them. Landlords wanted honey because they could sell it, could trade it for other goods, could use it themselves for sweetening food. They wanted beeswax because it could be made into candles, valuable before electric lighting, essential for evening activities, for reading, for religious services. A productive hive was a valuable property, wealth-generating property, sometimes worth more than a cow or a pig. Having beehives made you relatively wealthy, gave you something to trade, gave you some power in a society where most people had very little. Honey contains oligosaccharides, complex carbohydrates that function as prebiotics. Prebiotics are food for probiotics, food for the beneficial bacteria living in your gut. These feed the good bacteria, help them thrive, help them crowd out harmful bacteria, support overall gut health and digestive function. So honey isn't just sweetness passing through your body unchanged. It's feeding the ecosystem inside you, supporting the trillions of bacteria that live in your intestines, that help digest food, that produce vitamins that support your immune system. Even the bacteria in your gut, these ancient partnerships between humans and microbes, benefit from what the bees make. Everything is connected, everything influences everything else. Yes, bees sleep. Not all at once, and not like mammals sleep, but they have definite periods of inactivity that serve the same restorative purpose. Younger bees sleep inside the hive, resting between duties. Older forager bees sometimes sleep outside, clinging to grass stems or flowers, resting after a long day of work. A sleeping bee is still, her antennae drooping forward, her body relaxed, her breathing, if you can call it that, slow and steady. Even these tireless workers need rest. Even these creatures who seem to exist only for work, who give everything to the colony, take time to simply be still, to let their tiny bodies recover, to rest their wings and minds. There's something comforting about knowing that even bees sleep, that even they need rest, that the world allows time for recovery and restoration. Studies suggest that honey can improve cholesterol levels, can reduce bad LDL cholesterol, while increasing good HDL cholesterol. The effect is modest but measurable, especially with regular consumption over time. It's not going to replace statins or dramatically change your cardiovascular risk. But it's real, it's beneficial, it's another quiet way that honey supports health, another quiet benefit, another way that honey works in your body for your benefit. The ancients who called honey medicine, who prescribed it for various ailments, who believed it promoted health and longevity, were right even if they couldn't measure cholesterol levels. They just knew people who ate honey seemed healthier, lived longer, suffered less disease. They were observing a truth that science would later confirm and quantify. Experiments have shown that bees can count up to 4. They can be trained to expect food at the 4th landmark, to choose the 4th opening in a series, to understand position in a sequence. For a creature with a brain the size of a sesame seed, this is remarkable mathematical ability, sophisticated cognition we wouldn't expect from an insect. Counting requires abstract thinking. It requires recognizing patterns, understanding sequence, having a concept of numbers separate from physical objects. You're not just seeing 3 flowers, you're understanding 3-ness, understanding that 3 is different from 2 or 4, and bees can do this, at least up to 4. These little creatures understand mathematics in their own way, can work with numbers even if they can't articulate or conceptualize them the way we do. The compounds in honey can reduce inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is at the root of many health problems, from heart disease to diabetes to arthritis to maybe even depression and Alzheimer's. Anything that gently reduces chronic inflammation, that helps keep the body's inflammatory response under control, is valuable. It's not a miracle cure, not a replacement for anti-inflammatory medications when they're needed. But it's a gentle support, a natural aid that humans have been using since before we understood what inflammation even was, since before we knew why joints ached or wounds swelled. Our bodies recognize honey as helpful, as healing, respond to it in positive ways. The oldest bee ever found was preserved in amber from Myanmar, caught in tree resin that hardened and fossilized. This ancient bee is about 100 million years old, give or take a few million years. It's been preserved perfectly, every detail intact, every hair visible, looking like it died yesterday rather than 100 million years ago. This ancient bee looks remarkably similar to modern honeybees. 100 million years of evolution, and the basic design hasn't changed much. Sure, there are differences if you look closely, small variations in wing venation or body proportions, but fundamentally bees have looked like bees for a very long time. They found something that works, a body plan that's efficient and effective, and evolution has seen no reason to dramatically change it. When something is already nearly optimal, already perfectly suited to its purpose, there's no pressure to change. Some research suggests honey can support memory and cognitive function, possibly due to its antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties, possibly through mechanisms we don't fully understand yet. It may help protect brain cells from damage, may help maintain the neural connections that form and store memories, may support healthy brain aging. Imagine that. The same substance that helps preserve everything else might help preserve your memories too. The same golden liquid that lasts forever might help your mind hold on to its treasures a little longer, might support the neurons and synapses that make you who you are. It's poetic, isn't it? Honey preserving not just food but thought, not just fruit but memory itself. About 1/3 of the food we eat depends on pollination by bees, either directly or indirectly. Almonds, apples, blueberries, cherries, cucumbers, melons, pumpkins, strawberries, tomatoes, and dozens of other crops require bee pollination. Without bees, without their tireless work visiting flowers, we'd have a dramatically different and much less diverse diet. So every time you eat an almond, bite into an apple, enjoy fresh blueberries, thank a bee. Thank millions of bees, working through seasons, through years, through generations. They're not trying to feed us. They're trying to feed themselves, gathering pollen and nectar for their own survival. But in doing so, in pursuing their own purposes, they feed the world, make our agriculture possible, keep our food system functioning. Research indicates that honey may help treat stomach ulcers and other digestive issues. Its antibacterial properties work against Helicobacter pylori, the bacteria that causes most ulcers. Its soothing nature helps reduce inflammation in the digestive tract, helps protect damaged tissue, might promote healing of the stomach lining. Ancient physicians who prescribed honey for stomach ailments, for digestive troubles, for belly pain, were onto something. They watched it work, saw patients improve, recorded the results. They didn't know about H. pylori or understand the mechanisms, but they didn't need to. They observed, concluded, and treated effectively based on that observation. A baby bee, a larva, eats about 1,300 times in the first 3 days after hatching. Worker bees feed it constantly, first with royal jelly from their own bodies, then with a mixture of honey and pollen. The larva grows rapidly, exponentially, transforming from a tiny egg to a plump larva ready to pupate in just a few days. That's the speed at which the colony replaces itself, renews itself, maintains its population. Every 3 weeks or so, a new generation emerges from the cells, young bees ready to work, ready to take their place in the colony's organization, ready to continue the cycle. The hive is constantly regenerating, constantly becoming new while maintaining continuity, constantly replacing itself while remaining the same collective entity. Beyond mead, honey has been added to beer and other fermented beverages for thousands of years, valued for the complexity it adds, the sweetness, the additional alcohol it can produce, the way it aids fermentation. Many modern craft brewers use honey in specialty beers, creating interesting and complex flavors. Braggot, an ancient drink that's part mead and part beer, made from both honey and malted grain, was drunk by Celts and Vikings, by ancient peoples across northern Europe. The honey added depth to the beer, smoothness, golden character that grain alone couldn't provide. Once again, honey transforming, enhancing, making something good even better through its presence. Bees have two stomachs, not one. They have a regular stomach where they digest food for their own energy and nutrition, and they have a separate honey stomach, a crop, specifically for carrying nectar. This honey stomach can hold almost as much as the bee weighs, like having a separate fuel tank that's as big as you are. When the bee's honey stomach is full, when she's collected as much nectar as she can carry, she returns to the hive. She can control when and whether to transfer nectar from her honey stomach to her regular stomach if she needs energy for the flight home. Otherwise, she keeps it in the honey stomach, preserving it for delivery to the hive, for transformation into honey. Used on healing wounds, honey may help reduce scarring. Its properties promote healing, reduce inflammation, might help tissue regenerate more smoothly, might influence how collagen forms during the healing process. Modern wound care sometimes uses honey-based dressing specifically for this purpose, for helping wounds heal with minimal scarring. Ancient peoples who applied honey to injuries and noticed they healed with less scarring, who observed that honey-treated wounds left smaller, less noticeable marks, weren't imagining things. They were observing real effects, real physiological processes, even if they couldn't explain the biochemistry, couldn't identify the specific compounds involved, couldn't measure the effects precisely. Observation and experience were their science, and those methods worked, produced useful knowledge, saved lives, and reduced suffering. Every worker bee you see on a flower, every bee making honey, building comb, defending the hive, raising young, storing pollen, fanning to cool the hive, all of them are female, every single one, and they're all sisters, daughters of the same queen, sharing genes, sharing purpose, working together toward common goals. The hive is a sisterhood in the most literal sense possible. They work together with a level of cooperation that humans, with all our intelligence and communication abilities, struggle to achieve. No wages, no competition for individual resources within the colony, no hierarchy beyond the queen's reproductive role. Just work for the common good, just cooperation toward survival, just sisters supporting sisters. It's a society of equals working for their collective future, for the good of the whole. You can substitute honey for sugar in most recipes, though you need to make some adjustments. Reduce other liquids slightly because honey contains water. Lower the oven temperature by about 25 degrees because honey causes faster browning. Use about 3/4 cup of honey for every cup of sugar the recipe calls for because honey is sweeter. But the results are usually worth these small complications. The result is usually moister, more flavorful, with a more complex taste than the same recipe made with sugar. Honey cakes stay fresh longer, don't dry out as quickly. Honey cookies stay soft and chewy. Honey bread has a rich, deep flavor that sugar bread lacks, has a tenderness and keeping quality that makes it special. The bees give us not just sweetness, but better baking, better texture, better results in the kitchen. The collective sound of a hive humming, thousands of bees working, fanning, moving, breathing is approximately 250 Hz. That's a low, soothing tone, deeper than middle C on a piano, a frequency that many people find inherently calming. This is the sound of thousands of wings beating, thousands of lives being lived, thousands of small purposes adding up to one large purpose. Some people find this sound deeply calming, deeply centering. Hive meditation, where people sit near beehives and just listen to the hum, is practiced in some cultures, is believed to have health benefits beyond just relaxation. There's something primal about that sound, something that connects to deep parts of our brains, parts that remember when all humans lived close to nature, when we fell asleep to the sounds of insects and birds and wind. Because of its low moisture content and acidic pH, honey never develops mold. That destroyer of forgotten food, that fuzzy invader that ruins bread and fruit and everything else given enough time, simply cannot grow in honey. Even if you see something that looks like mold on old honey, on honey that's been sitting in your cupboard for years, it's usually just crystallization forming interesting patterns, or harmless pollen particles that have risen to the surface. This is part of honey's magic as a preservative, part of why it's so special. Mold is everywhere, its spores floating in the air constantly, landing on every surface, waiting for the right conditions to grow. But honey denies it those conditions, creates an environment where mold cannot possibly survive. The bees have created a substance that refuses decay in all its forms, that stands against entropy, that preserves perfectly forever. Male bees, drones, come from unfertilized eggs. The queen lays these eggs in larger drone cells, and they develop without any genetic contribution from male bees. This means drones have a mother and a grandfather, their mother's father, but no father. They're haploid, having only one set of chromosomes instead of the usual two. This strange reproduction system is called haplodiploidy, and it's common in bees, ants, and wasps. This unusual genetic setup might be part of why these insects evolved such advanced social behavior, such sophisticated cooperation. Sisters in a haplodiploid species are more closely related to each other than to their own offspring, which creates genetic incentive for cooperation, for helping raise sisters rather than reproducing themselves. Athletes have used honey for quick and sustained energy for millennia, used it to fuel their bodies through competition and training. Modern studies confirm it's as effective as commercial energy gels for endurance sports, maybe better because it's more easily digestible, because it provides a more natural balance of sugars, because the body recognizes and processes it more efficiently. Olympic athletes in ancient Greece ate honey before competition, believed it gave them godlike endurance. They were right, though they couldn't explain why. Marathon runners today use honey packets at mile markers. Cyclists squeeze honey into their mouths during long rides. Across thousands of years, across the entire span of the organized sports and athletic competition, the same solution to the same problem: how to keep moving when your body wants to stop. When a bee's honey stomach is full, when she's collected as much nectar as she can possibly carry, she can carry nectar equal to about half her body weight. Imagine if you could carry 70 to 100 pounds in a separate stomach while going about your daily tasks, while walking and working and moving normally. The bee does this and flies. She's a tiny cargo plane making dozens of flights a day, each time carrying a load that would be proportionally impossible for most creatures. efficiency beyond what seems possible, determination beyond what we can imagine, strength far beyond what her size would suggest. In the development of some early vaccines, before modern stabilizers and preservatives were developed, honey was used to help keep vaccines safe during storage and transport. Its antimicrobial properties helped prevent contamination, helped preserve the vaccine's effectiveness even in challenging conditions, even without refrigeration. So honey played a role in fighting disease even beyond its direct healing properties, even beyond its use as medicine for wounds and infections. It enabled other medicine, preserved cures, helped humanity combat illness on a larger scale. The bees, unknowingly, became partners in public health, their honey, supporting the development and distribution of vaccines that saved millions of lives. Bees can be trained to detect explosives, can learn to recognize the scent of TNT and other dangerous materials. They naturally associate smells with rewards, and researchers have trained them to extend their proboscis, their tongue, when they smell explosives, expecting a sugar water reward. Those sensitive antennae, evolved over millions of years to find flowers, can also find danger, can detect minute traces of explosives that might threaten human lives. It's a strange and unexpected application of their natural abilities, showing how adaptable their senses are, how sophisticated their scent detection is. Some people find that honey helps with acid reflux and heartburn, find that a spoonful of honey provides relief when their stomach acid is bothering them. It coats the esophagus, may help heal damage from chronic acid exposure. Its viscosity helps create a barrier between stomach and throat. It's another folk remedy backed by experience and increasingly by research. That soothing feeling when honey slides down your throat isn't just pleasant, it's actually providing protection, actually helping heal, actually making things better. The honey is coating, soothing, protecting, just like it protects and preserves everything else it touches. The term honeymoon likely comes from an old Northern European tradition where newlyweds would drink mead, honey wine, for 1 month after their wedding. One full cycle of the moon, drinking sweetness, celebrating their union. The honey was believed to promote fertility, to give the couple strength and joy, to bless their new life together. So the sweet beginning of a marriage, this special time when everything is new and perfect, is named after honey, named after the work of bees, named after this golden substance that humans have associated with joy and celebration for thousands of years. The substance bees make has become metaphor for human love, for sweetness between people, for the hope that relationships might preserve their joy as honey preserves everything it touches, might last as long as honey lasts forever. Bees don't just inherit instincts and follow them blindly. They learn from watching other bees, learn by observing and imitating. Younger bees watch older foragers and learn which flowers are best, where to find good food, how to perform tasks efficiently. Each hive develops slightly different knowledge, slightly different preferences, builds on the experiences of previous generations. Each hive has a kind of culture, a collective knowledge that's more than just genetic programming. Bees in one hive might favour certain flowers their neighbours ignore, might have learned routes and strategies that work particularly well in their specific location. They're not just following instructions written in DNA, they're learning, adapting, building on each other's experience, creating knowledge through observation and practice. Surprisingly, despite being sweet, honey has antibacterial properties that may benefit dental health rather than harming it. Some studies suggest it can reduce plaque and gingivitis, can fight the bacteria that cause cavities. Medical-grade honey is even used in some oral health products designed to promote gum health. It seems counterintuitive, seems wrong. Sugar rots teeth, causes cavities, feeds the bad bacteria in your mouth. But honey, despite being sweet, actually fights those bacteria, actively works against them. The bees make something that defies our expectations, that works differently than we'd predict. Bees literally work themselves to death. A foraging bee's wings eventually become tattered and torn from all the flying, from hundreds or thousands of flights over her short life. Once her wings are too damaged to fly effectively, she can't forage anymore, can't return to the hive with food, can't fulfill her purpose, and that's usually the end of her life. She might make hundreds of flights, visit thousands of flowers, travel hundreds of miles in total, and then her wings just wear out, fray at the edges, develop tears and holes. She doesn't retire, she doesn't rest, she works until she literally can't work anymore, until her body fails. There's something both beautiful and heartbreaking in that dedication, in that willingness to give everything, to work until there's nothing left to give. The clarity of honey depends on how it's processed and whether it's crystallized. Filtered and heated honey is usually clear and transparent, looking like amber glass. Raw, unprocessed honey is often cloudy because it contains pollen, propolis, tiny wax particles, all the small pieces of the hive that give it character and additional benefits. Some people prefer clear honey for its appearance, its clean look, its aesthetic appeal. Some prefer raw, cloudy honey for its additional nutrients and authentic nature, for the fact that it hasn't been overly processed, hasn't had anything removed or changed. Either way, it's still honey, still made by bees following their ancient instinct, still carrying that essential sweetness. Bees can actually get drunk from fermented nectar. Sometimes they find overripe fruit where the sugars have begun to ferment, where natural yeast has started making alcohol. Sometimes they find tree sap that's fermented. They consume it, thinking it's normal nectar, and return to the hive flying erratically, bumping into things, unable to navigate properly. And yes, the hive has bouncers, has guard bees stationed at the entrance who can smell the alcohol on returning bees. If a bee is too intoxicated, the guards sometimes refuse to let her in, turn her away, make her wait outside until she sobers up. Even in bee society, there are standards of behaviour, expectations of competence, consequences for overindulgence. The difference between a worker bee and a queen bee isn't genetic at all. They start from the exact same eggs, have the exact same DNA. What makes them different is diet, nothing more. Any female larva fed exclusively royal jelly throughout her development will become a queen. Any female larva switched to a mixture of honey and pollen after the first few days will become a worker. Royal jelly is a secretion from young worker bees' glands, thick and creamy, rich in proteins and nutrients. A larva that eats nothing but this special food grows larger, develops ovaries, becomes capable of laying eggs, becomes a queen. The same genes, different food, completely different outcomes. You literally are what you eat, even more dramatically than we usually mean that phrase. When heated, the sugars in honey break down and recombine, creating hundreds of new flavour compounds through chemical reactions. The result is honey caramel, which has a depth and complexity that's different from regular caramel, richer and more sophisticated, with layers of flavour that unfold on your tongue. Honey caramel tastes expensive, tastes carefully crafted, tastes like something that took thought and skill to create. And it's all because the bees made something so perfect in its natural state that even transformation through heat creates something beautiful, something new, while still retaining echoes of the original sweetness. We're coming toward the end of our journey through the world of honey, friend. Your breathing has probably slowed, your body has probably relaxed into your mattress, your mind has probably drifted in and out, catching some facts, missing others, not worrying about either. That's exactly right. This isn't a test. There's nothing to remember, nothing to prove, just golden stories washing over you like warm waves, carrying you gently towards sleep. Honey is, when you think about it, one of the most remarkable substances on Earth. Made by tiny creatures following ancient instincts, yet perfect in ways humans can barely understand, let alone replicate. It never spoils, heals wounds, feeds us, sweetens our lives, preserves memories in flavour and scent. It's been with humanity since before we were fully human, and it will likely be here long after we're gone, unchanged, patient, sweet. Somewhere right now, in the quiet darkness, bees are sleeping in their hives, clustered together for warmth, resting before tomorrow's work. And somewhere else, where the sun is shining, bees are flying through gardens and fields and forests, visiting flowers, gathering nectar drop by precious drop, beginning the ancient process all over again. The work continues, endless and cyclical, like the seasons, like the rising and setting of the sun. And that honey they're making, that sweetness they're creating, will eventually find its way to someone's table, to someone's tea, to someone's toast. It will sweeten a child's breakfast, soothe a grandmother's cough, be drizzled over yogurt on a Sunday morning. It will be tasted, appreciated, enjoyed, and maybe, just maybe, someone will pause for a moment and think about the journey that honey took, about the millions of wing beats and flower visits and miles flown, but mostly it will just be honey, doing what honey does, sweetening life, one spoonful at a time. Rest well, my friend. Let the golden sweetness of these thoughts carry you into gentle dreams. Let the image of summer fields full of flowers, of bees dancing in the darkness of the hive, of honey flowing thick and slow, fill your mind as you drift off. Let the knowledge that honey is being made right now somewhere in the world, that the ancient process continues, that sweetness persists, give you peace. The bees will still be there tomorrow, still making honey, still following their purpose. The flowers will still bloom, the sun will still shine, and honey will still flow, golden and eternal, unchanged and perfect. Sleep now. Dream of honey if you dream at all. Dream of summer sunshine captured in amber. Dream of bees dancing, their knowledge to each other in the darkness. Dream of flowers opening their petals to the morning light. Dream of sweetness, of preservation, of small creatures creating something perfect through millions of small efforts. The world will keep turning while you sleep. The bees will keep working where it's day, and honey, that remarkable substance, will keep being exactly what it's always been: sweet, healing, eternal, perfect. Until next time, this is the Sleepy Professor, wishing you the deepest, most restful sleep, the gentlest dreams, the most peaceful rest. May your sleep be as sweet as honey, as lasting as honey, as perfect as honey. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well.